Move downstairs to our world map rug. We've been learning about Australia, so I thought that we could read a book about Australia. Australia by Madeline Donaldson. Boing, boing, where could you watch kangaroos jumping? There's some lovely kangaroos. The continent of Australia. A continent is a big piece of land. There are 7 continents on Earth, but Australia is the smallest. This is Australia right here. Australia is the only continent that is also a country. Australia's capital city is Canberra. Picture of Canberra. The island of Tasmania is also part of Australia. This is a forest of eucalyptus trees on Tasmania. Oceans surround Australia on all sides. Surf's up. Australians swim and surf in the continent's ocean waters. It's part of their culture that they like to surf. Off the northeastern coast of Australia is the Great Barrier Reef. It is the world's largest coral reef. This is in the ocean. That's why it looks so blue. And then all of these little squiggles here, you can see are making all these shapes. That's the coral. Animals called corals live in the warm waters around the reef. So this is an up-close picture of a coral. The highest parts of Australia are in the south and east. Catch air! Australians enjoy skiing and snowboarding there in the winter. Seems like Australians really like their outdoor time, whether it's surfing or skiing or snowboarding. Farmers grow wheat in the lowest parts of Australia. This land lies near the middle of the continent. Deserts cover much of Western Australia. Watch out for snakes like the desert death adder. Ooh, spooky. I expect it to be quite a dangerous snake with a name like that. The grasslands of Western Australia feed huge herds of cattle and sheep. These are merino sheep. They are kicking up dust as they go into a paddock or holding area. So it's very dusty, but you can still see that there are maybe 100 sheep in this picture. Remember the jumping kangaroos? They are marsupials. Marsupials raise their babies in pouches. There's the baby. There's the mom. She has her baby in her pouch. We read another book about kangaroos raising their children in pouches. Platypuses are found only in Australia. They have a wide, flat nose called a snout. This is a platypus. And that's its wide nose. Munch, munch. This koala is eating the leaves of a eucalyptus tree. Here's a picture of a real-life koala. Acacia trees are found all over Australia. Some kinds of acacia trees have bright flowers, but these don't appear to have flowers. Oh, actually, they do. These are yellow flowers. It's very beautiful. I thought they were just leaves, but they're not. They're bright yellow flowers. Most Australians live in large cities along the coasts. Sydney is the biggest city on the continent. This is a city. That looks like the opera house that we were learning about. I wonder if it is the opera house. That opera house was in Sydney. One of Sydney's famous buildings is the Opera House. It was the Opera House. Here singers perform in musical plays called operas. Few people live in the outback. This is the open countryside in the middle of Australia. Looks like they didn't build a lot here. It looks like mostly rocks and grass and nature. It seems peaceful. Zoom. Some people in the outback get around by plane. This is a small plane. It's probably much smaller than the planes you take to travel. When you travel around the world, it seems like a private plane. Australia has many interesting parts. Do you know about Ayers Rock? The Aborigines, or the first Australians, call this huge rock Uluru. We learned about Uluru. It's also called the Red Rock. We talked about how important it is to the indigenous people of Australia. Here we're seeing it again. There's always something new to learn about Australia. Here's a map of Australia. It shows us where the outback is, around here. This is the sandy desert. This is the Great Victoria Desert. This star here is Canberra, the country's capital city, where they make decisions. This here next to it is Sydney. That's where that opera house was. Then it looks like they have some mountains up this coast. And here is the Great Barrier Reef. That's the picture we saw in the ocean with all of those corals. And then it's surrounded on all sides by ocean. So here is the Indian Ocean, and here's the Pacific Ocean. Here's, again, the Indian Ocean. Here's some cool facts about Australia. Australia covers almost 3 million square miles. That's much farther than we could ever walk. The animals of Australia include echidnas, kangaroos, koalas, kookaburras, platypuses, Tasmanian devils, and wallabies. The plants living in Australia include acacia or wattle trees, eucalyptus or gum trees, and grass trees. There are about 20 million people in Australia, and most of them speak English. Aborigines make up a very small part, only 1% of Australia's 20 million people. Another word for Aborigines is Indigenous. We've talked about Indigenous people before. Indigenous people are people who have lived in the same place for hundreds or thousands of years. Their families have been in that place for as long as they can remember. Most of us are not Indigenous, but Aborigines are Indigenous. The large cities of Australia are Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth, and Adelaide. Canberra is the capital. There's a glossary here. A glossary tells us what some of the words mean. So Aborigines is a group of people who were the first to live in Australia. A capital is a city where a government is based. That means that's where the decision makers gather to make their decisions. A continent is one of the 7 big pieces of land on Earth. A coral reef is an area of coral rocks that lies near the surface of the water. Coral rocks are the skeletons of once living animals called corals. A country is a place where people live and share the same laws. Marsupials are animals whose females carry their babies in a pouch on the mother's stomach. An opera is a play set to music and sung by singers. And the outback is the open countryside of Central Australia. So that was our book about Australia that we read next to Australia on our world rug.